Can being a dual citizen save you from socialism? That's a question we've been asked a lot lately, as in this year of chaos with everything from an upcoming U.S. election to Brexit being finalized to the coronavirus, we've been flooded with inquiries from folks who are increasingly concerned about their home countries in the West coming after their wealth, coming after their freedom, and basically being bad places to be wealthy. They fear wealth taxes, rising income taxes, higher taxes on capital gains and investment, and new inheritance taxes, and just outright confiscation of their wealth. So the question is, can going to another country, can being a citizen of another country help you protect yourself against these financial catastrophes? I'm going to tell you what you need to know in this video. I'm Andrew Henderson, and here at Nomad Capitalist, we help successful 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where they're treated best with everything from international tax planning, asset protection overseas, second citizenships to preserve your freedom and give you a sense of options, and investments in emerging countries. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com. And to answer the question on dual citizenship saving you from socialism, let me first encourage you to think long term. You know, every so often an event happens in the news, a series of events happen. There's some kind of chaos, some kind of rioting, some kind of election coming up. After the US election in 2016, after Brexit in 2016, we were flooded with people coming then. And what I think is always important to understand is, if your concern is one election and your guy wins, where's the trend going? Let's say in the United States, people are calling us and saying, I'm afraid that Joe Biden's going to get in. They're going to impose wealth taxes, as they're talking about in California. They're going to put that on the whole country, and they're going to start to take our money in a place where we're already not very popular for having it. And in that case, the momentum is against you. In the Western world, as we always talk about here, the momentum is against high earners. It's against high net worth individuals. It's against success in general, as people increasingly want to take your money, and they have all the new reasons to justify why that is acceptable and why you're wrong to have wealth. So look at that trend. In my example of the United States, if Trump wins again, you've got another 4-year reprieve, potentially. Trump hasn't certainly done everything to lower taxes, but you've got a 4-year reprieve potentially in your mind. What's going to happen in 2024, right? So I don't want this just to be a reaction to, well, if my guy loses, then freak out and there's no hope. And if my guy wins, then everything's cool, there'll never be a problem. I think it's something that you want to take on a long-term basis. And how I would look at it is this. You have to understand your country's tax system. So the United States, in my example, has its own unique tax system that follows citizens all around the world. Pretty much every other country, although there are some that are starting to mimic the US in some ways, pretty much every other country allows you to escape the tax system and just go and live somewhere else. So while if you are an American and you go to work running a bank in Dubai, and let's say you make $1 million salary for that, you're going to get some kind of exclusion for living overseas. But since the UAE does not have a tax treaty with the United States, you are just going to pay on the vast majority of that salary, not in the UAE, not in Dubai, but to the United States. Whereas if you were from France or from Australia or from Canada, at least for now, you could move to Dubai, run your business, have your job, whatever it may be, and you would not be taxed at home. Now, it's becoming harder for people in those other countries outside of the US to leave their country. Countries are putting up more rules and making it more difficult to escape their tax system. They're being more stringent and chasing people down who have left and haven't, crossed all of the T's and dotted all the I's. So it's important to make sure that you're doing things properly, no matter which country you're from. But that brings up the idea of dual citizenship. And people are increasingly looking to citizenship by investment programs such as those in the Caribbean, where you can donate money and get a passport in a matter of months. That is not the only way to become a dual citizen. We have plenty of content on YouTube and on nomadcapitalist.com about other ways to get a passport, but it's perhaps one of the most straightforward and streamlined ways if you have the money. And so being a dual citizen, particularly as an American, alone is not going to save you. But what I think dual citizenship is it's a great plan B for what could happen next. You see a lot of countries around the world, in the Western world, starting to talk about raising their own taxes. In Spain, they want to raise the wealth tax. In France and in Canada, they've talked about imposing a tax, as the U.S. does, on their citizens and making it harder to get out. And what a dual citizenship does is it says, if this, let's call it socialism, comes to your door, you have a place where you can go. You have a country that has to let you in, not as a tourist, not even on a residence permit, but you are their citizen and you can go and live there. Some of these Caribbean countries have no income taxes of their own, have no wealth taxes, no inheritance taxes, no capital gains taxes. So if you went and lived there, most people don't, but if you went and lived there, you would be pretty well safe. Now again, if you're a U.S. citizen, it's not quite that easy, but if things get bad enough, you might want to financially divorce the United States. If you thought they were really coming to take all of your money, if you thought that your retirement account was going to be just have the top 50% taken by the government, if you thought they were going to impose a tax on your wealth the way they do have in other countries and take it and even put retroactive taxes in place the way California is talking about now, the way that happened under the last tax reform, if you think that that's going to happen, then at least you have this option where you can say, you know what, I don't want to be in the U.S. anymore. I'm going to go over here and live over here and be this country's citizen. I'm leaving the U.S. behind. And so that's how I look at it, particularly for U.S. citizens, is it is truly a backup plan. Now, some people are calling me and saying, listen, Andrew, I don't want to be a citizen of my country. I don't want to be a resident of my country anymore because there's really no way for me to reduce my taxes on my income. I have a certain kind of income. I'm going to go overseas. I'm going to do those things now. For people who are concerned about taxes going up, wealth confiscation, new kinds of taxes, I think it really is a plan B, that the citizenship alone is not going to save you. You're actually going to have to move out of the country. And so there's three things that I would do if you want to protect yourself from what you see as rising taxes and wealth grabs. The first thing is asset protection. This is simply getting your money out of the country. And there's a legal way to do this. We're not trying to hide money anywhere. We're not trying to open numbered bank accounts. It doesn't really exist anymore. But we want to legally get our money out of the country. This could be in foreign banks. It could be in foreign real estate, which in the case of the United States, foreign real estate that you don't rent out, it's not reportable. It could be precious metals. Again, in the case of the United States, if they're privately vaulted and segregated and allocated in your name, they're also not reportable. So you've got some options that are legally not reportable. You can also just diversify your money into other countries. And so that way you've got some money out. What I find very interesting is people will call me and they'll say, I'm really concerned they're going to come and take everything. So I want to get a second passport and leave the country. But then they keep their homes, they keep their bank accounts in the United States. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. But I'm saying if you're concerned about increasing a tax on wealth, I would want to have some wealth legally somewhere else overseas. It may have to be reported to the government, but it's not something they can just come in and take immediately. And that might even be your retirement account in some countries where you can offshore your retirement account. So at least you have, again, some actual asset protection with that. The second thing I would do is diversify into other currencies or other asset classes that allow me to have some inflation protection. So that could be cryptocurrency, it could be precious metals, it could be just other holdings in other currencies, again, whether it's bank accounts, real estate denominated in a foreign currency, whatever it may be. Because if you think that some of this bad stuff is going to happen in your country, perhaps the currency goes with it, whether it's the US dollar, whether the euro is your currency, the pound, whatever it may be. We've already seen in 2020 how the US dollar strengthened at the peak of COVID, and then has now substantially weakened against pretty much every other currency on earth. And so if you're thinking internationally, it's going to be a lot more expensive to do some of this stuff now, whereas a number of months ago, earlier in 2020, it was really very cheap if you were holding US dollars. And so I would want to be diversified to know that no matter what happened, even if my home country's currency tanked, I would be protected. And then the third thing I would do is look at second residence and second citizenship. They're not often the same. And then if you become a citizen of one of these Caribbean countries, then you may not want to live there. You may just want that as your backup plan. That could be your flag of convenience. And so you might just decide to say, listen, my country is going to the dogs. It's being taken over by crazy people who want to take all of our money. They want to perhaps affect our physical safety. We don't want to live here. And perhaps we don't even want to be attached as citizens anymore. If it gets that bad, okay? Again, understand, if you're a U.S. citizen and you live overseas and they decide to impose a wealth tax, you are going to be paying that because of citizenship-based taxation. Again, Australians, Canadians, etc., doesn't apply to you yet. It only applies if you live there. Spain, if you live there, you pay the tax. You need the second citizenship as a way to protect yourself against being a U.S. citizen in particular and being overseas, and they dream up a new tax, that will apply to you. If you live overseas as an American and you trade if you make passive income from trading stocks, that is subject. There is no exclusion for that generally. Now you can live in a country where maybe you pay a different rate of tax there and you get some credits, there's a treaty. I mean, there are some ways to potentially reduce your taxes overseas if you're living in namely European countries. But by and large, you're not getting out of paying tax on your capital gains. So if your income is largely based in capital gains, if you are making money selling assets, whether it's businesses, whether it's stocks, if you're earning money from dividends, not a lot you can do. New wealth taxes could impact you no matter where you live. So for me, second citizenship is the plan B. That is, if things get bad enough, I'm checking out entirely. For non-U.S. citizens, it is if my country also gets to that level where no matter where I go, they're going to follow me and then impose new taxes and then potentially take some money. The other thing that I would do, in addition to having not only a second citizenship, is have a second residence. That might be a separate place. So I'm a St. Lucian citizen. I might have a residence permit in Thailand or a residence permit in Portugal or in Malta or in Latvia or in wherever it is that I want to live. Or maybe I'm just going to have a couple residence permits around the world so that I always have a safe place where maybe that's where my real estate is, that I've diversified. I bought a home in Portugal that helps me get a residence permit, diversifies me out of US dollars. It's a place that I can go. Maybe it's a future second citizenship, an extra one. There's a whole lot of things that you want to keep in mind here. What I also want you to keep in mind is look at your retirement accounts. If you don't trust the country where you're living in, you might not want to be putting more money into retirement accounts. I've talked about why I personally never put money into an IRA or a 401k. If I were in another country, I guess that would be a super or ISA or different programs. I didn't want the government having control of my money. And I think that fundamentally it's a question of just how bad do you think it could get. I am not a conspiracy theorist, but I do believe that the Western world is going to be more aggressive in taking wealth precisely because that's exactly what they've been doing. And that's exactly what many of the politicians are saying they want to do. They say they want to raise their taxes. We made a video on what is Joe Biden's tax plan and what's that going to look like. It's higher taxes for Americans domestically. It's higher taxes for people, for Americans living overseas as well. It's higher for everybody. Capital gains taxes, ordinary income. Potentially some of the more left-wing people in his administration would push for a wealth tax, the way that California's now doing. If you're in California, you certainly got to get out of there. But it's all about being protected, and it's all about asking yourself, what am I really afraid of? And for me, taking the steps to at least take baby steps to start moving money into other banks, other real estate markets. If you think it's going to be bad, don't just plan on physically moving. Plan on moving your assets as well. And if you're continuing to buy into equities or debt in the country that you live in, if you're continuing to buy private mortgage loans or stocks or bonds or whatever, if you're continuing to buy real estate in your country, if you're continuing to put money in a retirement account, it's probably goes against the idea that they're coming after your money. And so I think a unified strategy here is important. Dual citizenship can be a great opportunity to give you an escape plan. It's not a cure-all in and of itself. It is just an extra option to have that you can pull the trigger on when things get bad. And obviously they're not just giving out second passports on the spot. Even in the fastest process, you're going to spend several months between collecting the documents that are needed, filing the paperwork, waiting for an approval, going through due diligence, filling out the forms, getting your passport mailed to you. Citizenship by investment programs don't require you to travel. You can do that remotely. You don't need to go anywhere. Other programs would require you to travel. But even the fastest program, it is going to take some time. And so if you're watching this and you're concerned about something that might happen in 6 months or 12 months, now would be the time to start. These programs sometimes tend to change. Sometimes for the better, usually for the worse. And so if you're trying to put together a plan, I think it's good to really think in advance. You don't need to be thinking 10 or 20 years in the future necessarily. That's not a bad thing to do. But I wouldn't be just freaking out over one election and breathing a sigh of relief when it goes your way, because to me the trend is heading in the wrong way. Dual citizenship, having a global citizenship plan overall is just one way to protect yourself so that no one country controls you or your money. How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, Learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.